Welcome to Athlete Complete, where we host raw and open conversations about the details that impact performance from current and former professional athletes, for parents, players, coaches, and fans.
Wow.
Right, they'd have to.
This is very manageable. It's like, all right.
Yeah.
But what's weird is, I mean, you're going to hit this now. Like,
Yeah.
you have always dreamed of having, like, maybe weekends off. For us, it was always, can I get a Saturday, Sunday off would be awesome. You know,
Right.
and then after 12 years, and then you go straight back into the sport, and you're like, oh, fuck, I can't just take a vacation again on a Saturday, Sunday. You're like, what am I doing? What am I doing with myself? Yeah.
Did you at least take a little bit of time off to go do some traveling and stuff?
Yeah, when I retired, my ex and I we bought a Airstream and renovated that, and then we lived in that for 7 months. So we kind of took off and did 21 national parks. Just stayed on the West Coast, basically the Rockies and West, and that was I think that was the best thing I could have done leaving the game, was just get out. And I didn't watch one soccer game for a year, just because I left the game with some resentment from being injured. And it was like, I don't even want to be connected at all. And I also didn't have a TV. I mean, I had a TV, but I didn't have proper internet to watch, games and stuff like that. We didn't have, Starlink wasn't around 5-6 years ago. So I didn't have the opportunity. Although if I could recommend, I would do a mushroom trip right after I retired. That would just to open up, have some gratitude for what you just did, because for me it was I was really pissed off leaving the game. Yeah,
that's actually
I've heard about that.
It's interesting to talk about, because I've been out. Obviously, I didn't have anything remotely close to the careers that you guys did, but I went into coaching with those organizations after I was done. So I was a part of the club for 12 years, and I had to reframe all that stuff. I mean, the resentment side of it, I was full of it. I mean, similar to what you were talking about, I went to games and didn't speak. I wouldn't talk to my parents about anything. It just was so, I think this is an overplayed word. It was triggering, but reframing it to a gratitude standpoint was something I've had to really learn how to do, and something that's really, really helped, and how cool it was, actually, But you're always battling that cost of what we went through, because you give everything to it and then it's gone. Give everything to it and then it's gone, and then seemingly there's not much for you on that back end there. So it's tricky, man. And James,
how do you give guys advice? What would you say for guys that are about to go through it, or obviously every athlete's going to go through it at some point, whether it's up to them or whether the game telling them that it's over.
Be vulnerable about my own experience and the things that I struggled with, and then help create healthy expectations about what they could experience with the context that they're individuals and they have their own stuff going on, right?
Nice.
And what they're feeling is going to be normal. It's not something you need to hide. It's you're gonna let's rationally understand why you're feeling this way, because you gave your whole fucking life to it.
Right.
So you're going to feel grief. You're going to feel sadness. You're going to feel this stuff. James, I mean, I'm not going to talk for you, but...
Yeah, I'm right there. Yeah.
Yeah. So you need to experience it and keep practicing gratitude and keep doing the self-work and figure out how to make those tools that you learn from sports accessible to the next thing that you do in life, right? And have the awareness that nothing is going to scratch the itch that you had when you played. I mean, it's just such a unique, incredible thing that you've done. Nothing will give it. You're not going to get that juice again, and it's okay. Just let's be grateful that you had it. I mean, the fact that you're sad means that you loved it, which is a cool way to kind of frame it. But you're going to experience the tough stuff, and you have kids. Dive into your kid and your family. It's the best advice I could do. I didn't have that, and I mean, we've spoken plenty about it. I dove into bottles of alcohol. That was my way to do it for a short term, and then I had to grow out of that phase too. So that comes with the vulnerability conversation. I'm not ashamed of that stuff anymore, so I'm open to sharing it, and it's tough.
Was there anyone in your locker rooms that I'll give you an example. We had a guy who's now my financial advisor, Will Hesmer. He was a goalkeeper, so goalkeepers are generally pretty quirky guys, and kind of like it seems to me like goalkeepers kind of are off on their own, similar to maybe like a pitcher, similar to a kicker in football, right? They're kind of just off on their own a little bit, disconnected at certain times. And Will, from day one, I mean, we played together 15 years ago, but I used to have to go get him every morning to carpool and pull him out of his apartment because he was watching Mad Money. And I think we talked about this before, but just he had a vision for what he wanted to do, even though he was going to play for another 8 years. Have you guys come across those guys in the locker room? Are they few and far between in baseball as they are in soccer, where everyone's really just, I'm focused on soccer, I'm focused on baseball, and whatever happens next is next?
Yeah, I would say from my experience, they're few and far between. Most guys are like full in on baseball. Like they go back to the hotel room in mid-game, play their video games, but then it's like back to the field. It's all baseball. I feel like it's interesting. You kind of feel like you stay in college almost. Like it's almost like you don't grow up when you played Major League Baseball. I feel like there's a lot of guys that are still like acting like they're 22 and they're 30 something, and then there's guys with families and you have to kind of like pull your shit together a little bit with like being a dad. But like other than that, it's like you're still acting like you're 22, 23 years old.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a couple guys every once in a while that's like, oh yeah, when I'm done, I'm doing this. I'm like, wow, good for you. Like it's pretty cool. You know what you're gonna do.
Yeah.
I was thinking about it just because like this is coming up a lot more for me as like heading into second half and end of my career eventually. Obviously, don't know when that will be exactly, but I've been I have those thoughts come up a lot, and I for a little bit as like wouldn't think about it, and then now I'm like, okay, well let's like stop running away from it. What do you got? And I finally accepted like I'm not going to do anything for at least a year. Nothing. I'm not going to let myself do anything because I know the way my mind operates is like as soon as one thing's done, I'm going to want to start on something else and get right into it. And I'm like, no, I'm not allowed to do anything for a year.
I love that attitude.
Like
Nothing.
I like that.
Like hang out at the beach, work out, relax. But I'm not allowed to because, I would like to think I'll have some people be like, hey, will you want to do this? You want to come help out here? And I'll be like, no, can't do it for a year.
Yeah. Do you have any idea what you want to do like when you're done eventually?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I think a lot of different areas excite me. So
yeah.
It definitely won't be working in professional baseball right away.
Yeah.
I want more time with my family. So I think that's like, it's tough, man. Like getting right back into professional baseball. You're back in the grind of the 162, and that's not what I want to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
I hear that.
Yeah.
But even having that kind of mindset and you're already ticking things off the box of things you don't want to do is a healthy way to go about it, right? And you give so much to when you're at the ballpark, and you can almost view it like your battery is getting drained while you're there, and you need to make sure whatever you're doing off the field is replenishing that battery. And there is research that shows that if you can compartmentalize that and then focus on something else, like maybe explore some things that you want to do when you're done playing, that might actually help what you're doing on the field as well, because it takes your attention away from it and gives it a chance to recover from it.
It's funny. It hasn't helped my performance on the field, but I think most people talk about how it does.
Really?
But it's like, yeah. It's almost like the more I don't think about it and the more I stay in this like robotic, like baseball family only, like that's the way to help me like perform better. And the more I think about other stuff, it's like, it's not helping.
Oh, interesting.
So yeah, I wish it was that way.
Yeah.
Does golf count as like another thing to direct your attention toward?
Yeah, so I've messed around with golf like growing up, and then I played in like my college get together golf tournaments that I have a blast in, but I'm pretty bad. And what I've always told myself is like, you can't go out and golf and expect to be good if you never practice. So I don't golf during the season, I don't golf in the off season, but when I'm done playing, I'm going to golf and I'm going to try to get really good because I live an hour away from like some of the nicest courses in the world. So I'm like, all right, I got to get good enough to play those. And so like that's going to take up a huge chunk of my time, which I'm excited about.
I mean, I think you already said it. You get hyper focused on one task and you want to go all in.
Yeah.
So if you're disconnecting from your sport, you might get that itch and that hook to really dive into it. And it takes away focus from your game. I mean, there's a guy on the Sounders who could be best 11 this year, defender. and he had to go home back to Colombia for like a week and a half due to some family issues, and came back. He was having a great season, came back, and it took him like 4 or 5 games just to get back in the rhythm. And for soccer, that's a month, just over a month, 4 or 5 games. And so we're not talking like 4 days.
Yeah.
It literally took him 4 or 5 weeks to get back into the rhythm to now. Yeah. And I talked to Andy Rose, the assistant coach, and that's a guy who has to train every single day and do something.
Yeah.
Right. His body, mind, like he can't disconnect, because once he does, he feels behind and his body feels behind, and other people notice it too. I think for a lot of us, it's easy to disconnect. And for some, it's better to stay in that routine.
Yeah. I'm that way for sure. Yeah.
Routine guy.
Mm-hmm. When it comes to transitioning after your playing career, how many, if you had to give a percentage of veteran guys who've played, 6-10 years, how many of those guys are approached by other organizations to come be a part of coaching or, batting coach, or, like, does it take a level of intellect or like your baseball brain for other coaches to come and say, hey, when you're done, let me know, because I want you to come be our hitting coach in St. Louis or something like that? Like, what's the percentage?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know the exact percentage. Maybe Pax would be able to answer that. But I haven't asked guys like a year after they've been done, like, hey, has anyone asked you to coach? But I'd assume that the guys that are smart, that they've helped players along the way. You have those guys in the clubhouse that like they teach other younger players. They teach guys that are talking the game. Generally, I'm assuming those guys are going to make good coaches, right? They've been doing it while they're playing, so after, like, it's just like a perfect transition if they wanted to do that. But like, some guys don't want it. Some guys want to go like, dude, I'm getting out. I want to go hang out with my family. I want to go play golf and relax. And then like maybe when the kids are older, I would coach. But yeah, I don't know the exact percentage or even like a rough percentage.
Yeah, I don't know any numbers or anything like that. Just from what I've noticed, it seems like guys that play less years, and kind of like maybe need a job, go into coaching sooner. I feel like the guys that are veterans that play 6, 10, or 12, whatever, 15 years, they're usually the ones that take some time, and maybe they're spending time with their kids while they're young, and then their kids grow up and they come back when they're a little bit older, and then they'll coach, kind of thing. I think I see that being more of a kind of common occurrence than guys that are veteran coming right back into coaching.
Speaking of the clubhouse guy, and I run into this with the girls that I coach and the boys too, the teams. In my experience, in my like day and age, whatever, 10, 15 years ago, in baseball, is it easy to recognize the guy like it is in soccer who can do the job on the field, but is also like a student of the game, that clubhouse guy? And in baseball, how many of those guys are there? Because it seems to me like in soccer, there's maybe 3 or 4 of those guys that are actually in the locker room that can do their job on the field, that do it consistently, but also can direct everything else on the field and know everyone else's role and what they're supposed to do. And I think it's missing with youth soccer today, from what I've noticed, is everyone is very focused just on themselves. I don't know if your experience with rookies coming in, Mitch and James, if they have a different perspective, or are you seeing still young guys that are in the locker room that are students of the game, that want to be leaders, that can do their job and know what everyone else is supposed to be doing at the same time?
I don't know, Mitch, you got anything for that?
Yeah, I think those guys are few and far between. Like they're rare. I think the really good ones are rare, and I think if you have a couple of them in the clubhouse, that's great. I think I don't know. I always refer to, like, at the end of the day, like, you have to do whatever you need to do to be the best player you can be on the field. And then there's guys that have capacity to like take other guys under their wing. And I think for a young player to come in, your goal should be how can I stay in the big leagues? Like, what can I do to get better and improve? And how can I be a good teammate? But most of the time, a young player is just trying to survive and stay in the big leagues, because this game rolls over so many guys fast. And then you get to a point where you look around, you're like, oh shit, I've done this for a couple of years, or I'm pretty good, or guys listen to me. And then you start taking on that role. You start talking to guys more and more. And I think too, like, the one thing that I would say maybe the last couple of years is I'd like to see come back is like talking the game more. I think everything, sometimes the whether it's analytics or these other things, like it gets a little cloudy instead of just talking the game and the intricacies of the game and what guys are thinking in the box and feeling the box or on the mound. Or also too, I've learned a lot from just talking to pitchers. I love picking the brains of pitchers.
Yeah. And that's interesting that you bring that up, because my brain was thinking about that. The in-between area where we're at in both sports, where data analytics versus old school mentality and feel and the savviness of the game. Like I think in soccer, it's more through the academy levels. It's teaching the structure. You have a lot more coaches that know the systems, and you have this set defined robotic roles within those systems. But on the coaching side, maybe you're losing some of the leadership and some of the feel and some of the personality that goes with the game, right? I think, and I know that your club has experienced that recently with analytics versus different types of coaching styles. I mean, are you guys seeing the same thing? It's interesting to me.
Yeah, for me, I feel like it's like analytics makes things so black and white, right? Where like the conversations happen in the gray. Like when you're kind of talking about what you think should happen versus you can just go to the numbers and say, oh, this is what the numbers say we should do. It's black and white. You're right, I'm wrong, or whatever. Yeah. It's more of a conversation when everything's kind of like, oh, but I see this. I notice this about this guy. I think I should shade a little bit towards second base on this kind of like situation or whatever. Whereas now everyone just looks at their cards and says, okay, I got to take 2 steps to the left and 1 step back. You know what I mean? Like Mitch, you in the outfield, I'm sure, you just look at your card and it tells you where to play versus like paying attention and being like, oh, I noticed that this guy in these kind of counts or whatever hits the ball in the gap more. So I'm going to kind of shade towards the gap. And I think that's like where the conversation comes from in baseball. Whereas like analytics is kind of ruining that part of it in my view.
Yeah, the outfield cards are interesting, man, because I look at them as like a recommendation, but I'll see certain guys, and I usually being like an offhanded outfielder where I'm playing right field, there's a righty up. I know where most righties hit the ball, and I know which guys can actually hit the ball over my head and which guys can't. Mm-hmm. And so when they have me positioned in certain spots, I'm like, this is so stupid. Like 90% of the time, this guy's not going to hit the ball here. So over the last couple of years, I've just shifted more towards where I know and where I've always played, and I think a lot of times it works.
Can you explain what a card is?
So they just it's basically defensive positioning. Like we carry a card in our back pocket that tells me exactly where to go. There's a point in the outfield where this is 0, like this is straight up, and then it'll say like 6 steps into that way, 8 steps back that way, and then it just tells you exactly where to play based off of analytics. The funny thing is when I start asking them a lot of questions, they're like, yeah, 48% of the time this is right. So it's like, it's 50-50. I mean, it's not even 50-50. Yeah. So like, I feel like most of the time I go, okay, cool. This is where they want me to play and I'll play there. But then there's some times where I'm in my head and I'm like, if this was like, hey, dude, 80% of the time this card's right, I'd be like, whoa, I'm never going to go veer from it.
Right.
It's not even 50-50.
Yeah. That's wild.
Yeah.
That's like a PK taker and a goalkeeper. You get your, that's wild.
Interesting. I think the part in soccer is they're so worried about like load management throughout the week and managing fatigue that, Brad, you can correct me on this, but like the forwards are allowed to practice 8 total shots or something like that the day before a game. Like there's a very strict rep count that they're adhering to.
There's that much load management. You guys, I know the games are like there's a ton of running and it's very strenuous, like once a week, but it's once a week.
Yeah, but practices are really supposed to be they're supposed to be more intense than the game, so that when the game comes, it's easier.
Okay.
Right. So you're building, like Ben said, you're building this up and down load throughout the week, and they're wearing the GPS bras every day. And then they've got their heart rate monitor and analytics on another band that they wear around their arm now.
Yeah.
They're managing everything. So like when I was playing, especially as you get older, younger players, not as much, but even so in the academy, yes, but they've got a little bit more leeway to do the extra work. But yeah, Jordan Morris can have, 10 minutes after practice, and that's the max that he's allowed to be on his legs.
Wow, that's crazy they have.
Yeah. As I got older, towards the end of the season, I would do the warm-up with the team, passing, and then when they went to play, I would just do a bike workout on the Kaiser. like heavy for 30 seconds, off for 30 seconds, like for 15 minutes. And that was my practice for the day. So it is, yes, serious load management.
Serious load management. Even practicing set pieces and things like that, where you can make really big differences in a game. Yeah. They cap it. That's enough. You're done. It's like,
and the players would be like, I feel fine. What am I? I want to stay out here and practice. And they're like, no, get inside. And it's like a real battle constantly. So that the fitness guy has to have a lot of trust within the locker room to get his point across, and with the coach, because Schmetz is old school.
Yeah.
Right. Schmetz played, for the Sounders 30, 40 years ago. And so he's built on the days of no GPS load. He just wants to fucking train.
Yeah.
These guys will be fine. They'll get through it. It's an interesting little battle that they face.
When he played, they were smoking cigarettes on the bench.
And drinking beers too.
Yeah. I know in Boston, they're working on a tracking system for guys to see how much they're running in game, especially like positional players. And it's going to because right now they just sit with a card and they write down okay, this guy ran 190, 290s, 390s, distance.
They don't have, they 100% have I feel like in Seattle we've had it for 3-4 years now.
Oh, I don't know. I just
they'll be like, hey, because I remember a couple years ago, they're like, I would always tell them, we'd do so much early work and things. And I was like, hey guys, you gotta be careful. Outfield, we run a ton. And then they're strength coach is like, you guys run a lot. I'll look at all the data. I go, I've been telling you for years. Every foul ball, I'm running to the wall. Dude, and they're like, wow, you need to take it easy in pregame. I'm like, yeah, I know.
That's what I've been saying.
Dude, you don't need this data to just watch a guy and
yeah.
But yeah, they've been. I feel like they've been tracking us all the time, because they would tell me my numbers hey, you hit your 90% or more sprint 5 times yesterday. I'm like, oh, cool. Yeah.
Cool. Wow. Well, I know in Boston, I think when I was there this year, they're working on something to do that. Cool. Maybe they already had it in Seattle. Maybe Sal's a bit ahead in that area, but I don't know.
Nice. Yeah, it's helpful.
Yeah.
Well, I like the way you framed it earlier, Mitch, with calling the outfield cards suggestions. And I think that's where data needs to kind of stay as well. I mean, there's people that take data and go, this is the way, this is the right way, this is what it's showing. But in reality, we're all humans playing something. We're playing a game. And so there's got to be a little bit of here's the suggested way of doing it, but use what you've trained yourself to do and be savvy within this.
I couldn't agree more. And that's where I think the player and the coach need to be on that mindset. We're hey, we're not opposed to analytics. We learn from it. But at the end of the day, we go off field. We've been doing this our whole lives. And there's some of that. I think what happens when whether it's a front office or certain analytical coaches, they get too involved or they, for lack of a better word, brainwash the guy. We're no, you need to stick to this all the time because, let's say 60% of the time it's going to be the right thing to do. But there's still 40% or even 70-30. It's but your gut tells you you still got that 30%. And that's where I think the really good coaches, when I see in baseball, but I also see in football and some of these other sports, they understand both. Mm-hmm. And I think they probably do their prep work and go, okay, if these situations arise, this is what the analytics say, but I'm going to also go off my gut.
Yeah. Well, I know, Brad,
go ahead.
When you played, it was, if you reach this minute mark in the game, your percentage of injury goes up.
Right.
X amount. And if that's put into a player's brain, it's he's looking at the clock going oh, I'm at 78 minutes. I have a 48% more chance of pulling my groin. What does that do for your psychological state? It kills you.
Well, it's just the whole term sports scientist has always killed me. Just because, like you said, there's so much nuance in a sport. It's all about the game within the game. And if you can learn that, then none of that other stuff really matters. Right. And I had to switch positions to center back late in my career. And I wasn't used to the game within a game that's as center back. So I had a center back partner who had played that position for 15 years. He won the most Defender of the Year honors in Major League Soccer history, best defender to ever play in Major League Soccer. And we would put our numbers up afterwards. And I always ran 1,500 to 2,000 meters more than him in every game.
Yep.
And it's not because I was faster. It was just because I didn't know the game within the game. Right. And that's why he was rarely injured. played for 15 years, had his accolades because he knew the nuances within the game. I didn't know those things. I didn't have that experience in that position to be able to not look at the 78th minute and be like, oh shit, my hamstring most likely is going to pop right now, right? Just due to how much I run and my intensity. And but that's that anticipation factor that is that in baseball a lot, anticipation versus reaction? Because if they're telling you to be in this spot, you're reacting out of that position versus anticipating that ball is going to go there. Because in soccer, you're watching it build up. It's like there's no set plays. And so you're having to like jog back into your memory the past 20 years that you've played the game. And your brain has already seen those moments. You don't consciously see it, but your brain has seen these patterns before and you're anticipating what is next. Is that in baseball at all too?
I feel it in the outfield. Like I'm creeping one way because I'm like, I see this guy's swing. He's like constantly late. So I'm creeping more. But then you got the card that's like, ooh, that's you shouldn't be playing there. But I'm like, that's where you fight with the card. And I'm like, I don't care.
Right.
Like this is where it's telling me.
Yeah.
With baseball, it's weird too, though, because sometimes in the outfield, I read swings and I'll see that this guy is just getting, for whatever reason that day, he's late or he doesn't see this pitcher well and he's super late. And then sometimes a guy will throw an off speed and he'll pull it. And then you're like, well, that's not, I'm reading he's late. And then all of a sudden he pulls the ball or he hits the ball in the gap. And it's like, well, you also like, I don't know exactly what he's going to throw him.
Right.
But yeah. There's your brain's telling you this, like this is happening. And then,
Yeah. Pitching's a little different because like it's, we're not really running around, right? Like we're throwing balls. It's like sort of like, you're managing load. It's easier to pitch when there's nobody on base. When you've got guys in scoring position, the intensity goes up, So there's games when you throw 100 pitches and it's kind of a cruising game. You got not many guys on base, and it's not as taxing. Whereas you may throw 75 pitches in 4 innings one game, but it was a grind and a bunch of guys are on base. That's going to be more taxing than the 100 pitches. So it's knowing the game versus like the analytics of like how many pitches did he throw, this and that. Like there's different intensity, different moments. I don't know. Is it the same thing in the outfield? If there's like, you have to run harder because there's a guy on second base and maybe you got to try and throw him out at home or something like that.
No, I totally understand what you're saying on the mound. That makes perfect sense. And I think that's where like a coach needs to know, oh, these are more stressful innings than the pitch count says. And that's where like you take like strictly pitch count out of it. Cause it's like, dude, this guy was grinding for 4 innings as opposed to cruising for 7.
Right.
But no, in the outfield, it's kind of like, for me, it's like, no, I try to sprint for every ball I know I can catch and get to everything. If my glove can hit it, I'm diving.
Gotcha.
But I would say with that is like, the only time I play more aggressive in certain situations. Like runner on second, nobody or runner on second, 2 outs, and there's a ball that I'm like, it's like a iffy one to dive for. I'll probably go for it because if I miss it, if I catch it, we're out of the inning.
Right.
Where nobody on, it's a little,
gotcha. Yeah. That makes sense.
What's interesting about that, James? Sorry, Sean, is it's when there's runners on, you have to pay attention to more things, and that requires energy. The focus, and you have these like neurons in your brain that like have a hierarchy and they start to pay attention to certain things. And when you're splitting them, it will fatigue you out quicker. And as a goalkeeper, after games, I was more tired mentally than I was physically because you're paying attention to so much stuff, and you're also paying attention to what could be happening. So you're getting fatigued out in that manner. Now, I was 23 when I started training with Casey Keller, who was one of the best American goalkeepers ever, and he was 40. And, he do the physical stuff. I could jump higher than him and do, at that time anyway. But he would kick the shit out of me because he knew exactly what to pay attention to, and he knew what things weren't worth paying attention to. And the way he managed a game with his mind and his voice, because he knew where to direct attention and he could forecast efficiently where we need to protect things versus young guy who probably doesn't understand the game an ounce of what he has, is trying to correct all these things going on at once, and it's just too much to pay attention to, and it's fatiguing out, right?
He's like an elite problem solver and an elite predictor, right?
Yeah, before the problems even happen. It's really cool.
That is cool.
Well, there's not really biometric data that you can pull now for mental fatigue, right? I mean, you can look at heart rate variability potentially or blood pressure, but even if you're measuring that in game, you can't put a biometric around like stress or friction or the complexity of an issue that you're facing in right field or on the mound or on the field anywhere, right? I mean, do you think, Ben, you know a lot more than we do? Like,
there is new tech coming out, but I think blood work's probably the most effective way to do that. And I don't think anyone's gonna go pick your finger while you're in the outfield and check what your hormone levels are doing.
right.
It's a tough one. Because stress is such an abstract thing.
Is that just a cortisol serotonin thing?
There's a bunch of different hormones, but yeah, cortisol is a big one. Like, so if you go into Miami, for example, every day I think they walk in and do a finger prick and check their blood just to see what their hormones are doing and how much they recover and what kind of stress they're under. And that's how they incorporate that into their load management for the day. Because if you took the blood work of someone who has confidence and has a good mindset versus someone who has anxiety and different other stresses going on, they're going to look different.
See, that to me, that's far more interesting than some of the other sort of more basic analytics. Because if you don't got it that day and you do a finger prick and your cortisol's up, your epinephrine and norepinephrine is up going into training, like that's probably a day where you need to take it a little easier. Like that just seems like more compelling biometric data for everybody.
Potentially, but I would be careful on what inference on what you should do after the fact, because maybe going through training relieves your stress and things start to switch in a positive mindset too. Like you don't want to keep someone who's anxious from whatever's going on in their life and keep them in that mindset. It's like, oh, you're anxious, we're going to keep you out of something that you love that's going to make you feel better. Like, doesn't make any sense either, right? So there's more to it. You got to dive into the human a little bit more and understand who they are as a person. And I think that's the big evolution in the next wave of overall performance, is looking at this thing holistically and understanding how these systems in your body play off each other. I mean, cognitive stress is going to deplete physically. Physical stress is going to affect things cognitively. And it's okay. We just need to understand it and learn how to play with that information and utilize that information effectively. I think with modern data and analytics, it's more going the opposite of that and making it more robotic, which you're taking away enjoyment of what you're doing. You're taking away purpose and the whole spirit of the whole thing. And you're really making it a serious job, which for kids, that's a problem, I think. For pros, I get it, because it's big money. Potentially.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see how this is all going to unfold the next 10, 15 years with, I would say that the analytics have run a little crazy with sports over the last, 5, started probably 10 years ago and then gotten really crazy the last 5 years. I don't know about soccer, but like, how is this? It's got to have an impact on kids and what they're taught, and is it going to make them better? I think you can see like specific skills might be like, oh man, this guy's able to kick a ball harder than, because they've been tracking it or measuring it, or from baseball, like you see guys hit the ball harder than they ever have before, but man, when you talk to them about hitting, they don't know what the hell they're doing or stuff like that. Like the nuances, the game within the game, they've never even thought about it. Yeah. But their metrics are great,
Right. Yeah. We've got a family friend whose 11-year-old son is, plays on a couple of different travel baseball teams, and everybody pitches, I think, at that level. Everybody gets a kind of a turn, but they're really strict about pitch count, right? So you can't get 11-year-old kid. So like from an analytics standpoint, that's preventing injury,
right?
And they've even extended it to outside of practice. Like when you're done with practice today, don't go home and throw at all.
Right.
So that's like the brighter side, I think, of some of that analytics stuff and making sure that, that youth players are staying safe. But you're right. If you get too stuck in the numbers and you don't know how to manage your breath or your visualization or, choosing how you show up to practice that day in a conscious way to let go of what happened at school or your girlfriend, if you can't let that shit go and you're just wound up and that's a different thing altogether.
Yeah. Or you're just so caught up in like the result of the miles per hour that you don't even know because even if you're like you're just, let's say, miles per hour you're throwing. Like there's gonna be ups and downs no matter what, whether you're super fatigued or feeling amazing. But if you're always chasing that result, you have no idea what got you there or like how to stay consistent. Then I feel like you're gonna go into a mental freak out. We're like, why is it dropping? I don't know why it's dropping. Like, and then you probably start thinking, well, I'm not gonna throw good today. I'm not gonna be able to get guys out. My velo's down, and it's like, dude, who cares? Like when we were growing up, James, it was like no one had a radar gun until you're like late in high school.
Yeah.
So it's like,
well, it's the eye test,
exactly.
Now it's all this like tracking. We see with young pitchers coming up, they're all looking at, what's my spin rate? What's my, my movement profile, all this stuff. And I'm kind of like, who cares?
Yeah.
Like, is it working? Like, can you get guys out? Do you think you can get guys out? And I think guys kind of like get themselves into trouble sometimes because they're looking at like, my sweeper's only moving at 13 inches today. Normally it's 17, whatever. And it's like, dude, but they're like, I think it can get guys kind of like messed up. And, sports, you can't think and play the sport. You have to just like do. There's like the thinking brain and the athletic brain.
Yeah.
If you're out there playing with the thinking brain, like if you're in the box and you're thinking about, my hands have to be here and I have to do this and have to do this, you're not getting a hit. Like I'm getting you out every time. And if I'm out there thinking like, I got to place my hand and my finger pressure just like this and do that, I'm going to throw you a cookie and you're probably going to hit a homer. It's all about like, you have to be able to go out there and not think and just react and do, and being in the moment. And I feel like there's this, with analytics, it kind of brings you closer to like the thinking too much.
Right.
And I see that in guys. They're thinking too much about what they're doing instead of just being in the moment and being athletic. And I think that takes away from the game and what you can actually accomplish on the field.
Yeah.
So if you're coaching kids, how do you let them know about the game within the game? Because I've tried, right? And all these girls and guys care about is the end result. All they watch is TikTok videos. All they watch is goal highlights. Similar to like if someone was watching a Mariners, all they watch is the home runs. And that one strikeout pitch, not what got them to getting that last pitch to get the last out in the last inning, or what got them to, reading the pitch count from a hitter, whatever it is, and finally finding their one pitch and being patient enough to hit a homer or a base hit, whatever it is. How do we get them to the point of knowing the game within the game? Because you can say, hey, ladies, there's a game within a game here. You're actually playing 1v1 in this situation while there's a whole 11v11 game going on, right? That's been my most difficult task in getting across, because I think for all of us, we came up in a different era where we were just playing the game because we had fun doing it. And now, like you said, the analytics have crept in and it's become a very driven game of just results-based business.
I think like asking those questions and talking about that is like the first step. And I think that's great, because then it just sparks some creativity and like awe and question. Like I'm sure you have a couple players that are like really interested in what you're saying. They're like, wait, what do you mean? Yeah. And then that sparks conversation. I think that's what it starts with. But I think there's some other players that it might take a longer time to get through, or they might never really understand it. And it's some of the best players I play with. I'll try to get into that unique of a conversation where I start talking about stuff like that. And I realize like, oh, they don't really think like this, but they're really good. And I'll just kind of be like, never mind. Like, I was like, I don't want to mess them up.
Yeah.
Some guys are so athletic, so good that like they rely on natural skill. Just don't mess them up. And the other ones that they're pretty, like I've always considered myself, I have very average tools, but I've tried to maximize those tools with, mindset and stuff like that, and knowing the game and knowing myself, and try to be the best I can be, because my skills alone aren't going to get me, super far. But I think just talking about it is like makes kids think, and hopefully brings more awareness to them, and they start asking more questions.
Yeah, I think.
Oh, go ahead, James.
I was just gonna say, like, you don't get the result by thinking about the result. You get the result by thinking about the process. If I'm out there pitching as a guy on first base, and I'm like, I'm gonna throw this pitch so I get a double play ball right here, I'm probably not gonna throw a pitch that gets a double play ball. If I'm like, all right, I'm gonna throw this two-seamer down away right here, I'm gonna throw it as hard as I can right there. If I'm focused on that process, I have a much better chance of getting the result of the double play that I want right there. But if you're just watching like the strikeout pitch or the kick that goes in the goal, you don't know the process it took to get there. So I feel like it's teaching the process, and like, this is what happens to get this to happen, to get this to happen, so that I can do that. You know what I mean? So everyone's so result focused because that's all people care about. That's what you watch on Sports Center or ESPN, whatever, you know, is like, you watch the results, what most people talk about. But what gets you to that result is the process. And I feel like the process isn't focused on or talked about nearly as much as it should be.
Yeah, Brad, I'm glad you brought that up, because I was listening to another podcast and they were talking about this exact same thing. And the way our world works now, it is short-termism, and it is just looking at that last little bit. And that's what they're emulating without understanding the how to do it. You know, and so as a coach, I would be showing them or showing them how to emulate the how you go about your stuff. And then the outcome will take care of itself a little bit more effectively. So if they're going to rain games, I'd say, watch what they do when they step on the field and how they run and how they do all this stuff. Don't worry about the last little bit. It's the how. It's an interesting time, because 5-10 years ago it was all about mindfulness and being completely present. Now with how crazy social media and technology is right now, now we need to switch back to going and looking a little bit more down the road to what are the processes to get to where we want to get to, not just do it now. You know,
interesting. That makes tons of sense.
It's flipping it back a little bit, because the way they phrase this, and I'm going to butcher it a little bit, but I don't care. 200,000 years ago, we have an operating system in our brain that could only predict things like, where am I going to eat next? You know, what's the best way to survive? And, you know, it wasn't until recently we had these things in our brain that really, fuck it, cut that part out. We'll go to the next thing.
It's the 76,000 messages that we receive every single day.
Yes.
Right? It's like, we how on earth can we function at a high level when we are absolutely inundated with that much information, from a billboard to a podcast to it's totally overwhelming. And you have this dopamine shortage because you are just churning through that 6 seconds at a time. Right.
And you're not even conscious about some of it.
Right.
Like sometimes we walk into the clubhouse and there's 8 TVs on and I'm just like, dude, I gotta get out of here. This is, you know?
Yeah.
Like, we don't even know what we're being hit with so much, and it's having an effect on you.
Yeah, and if you don't have any tools, if you don't have any techniques to manage that for yourself, and it's going to be unique to you. Maybe it's a box breath, maybe it's, you know, tapping, you know, whatever those things are that work for you specifically are not going to work for this guy or this guy. They have to be totally different and custom to you. And that takes some inquiry. It takes some time to explore, like, okay, well, how do I respond to loud locker rooms? You know, like there's something there that 10 or 15 years from now is going to be a major, major issue for people, because the kids growing up today are just squeezing all of the dopamine out of their body and their brain like a sponge. And then they're showing up and they're fried and can't be present.
Yeah.
Dopamine has a spike and then it has a counter. It goes down the other way, right? So the more you spike it up, the more it resets itself by going negative. So it's like this positive hit and then this anxious recovery time, right? So if you're looking at the short-term views of like, I just scored the goal or just I'm emulating a goal, you're getting the big dopamine spike. But the way to raise your baseline level is through these micro processes that get you there. So that mindset is process-based, and that raises your motivation over time versus doing this crazy up and down wave.
Yeah. I had this sports psychologist in Seattle earlier in my career that kind of, I think I told you about this, Ben, was he taught me, like, okay, what's the end goal? What do you want? You know, so you look at the end goal and then you start going backwards. It's like, all right, so what do I have to do to get that end goal? And then you kind of say, all right, so I have to do that to get the end goal. What do I have to do to do that? And you keep on going backwards until you get to the bare bones of like, all right, what do I need to do to get that first step done to getting to the end goal? And that's what you focus on, is that first step. And it just keeps on leading to the next thing that helps you get to that end goal. But if you kind of try and skip steps, you're not going to get there.
Does that go all the way back to like sleep? breathe? Like, does it go that far back when you start with the end in mind and work backward?
You can, I think for me, like, I'll give you an example. Like, let's just say I said I want to be an all-star, right? So I was like, okay, I want to be an all-star. What do I have to do to be an all-star? I got to win a lot of games. I got to have a low ERA. Okay, what do I have to do to win a lot of games and have a low ERA? I have to go deep in games, and I have to like say strike guys out. Okay, it's like, all right, what do I have to do to go deep in games and strike guys out? I got to throw strikes, and I have to throw,
the
like
really
good pitches.
Right?
Sorry,
back up again.
No, you're good.
You're good. Okay.
Yeah. So then, so what do I need to do to, throw strikes and go deep in games? Whatever. I need to focus on this, whatever that is. Whether it's like I need to be in the moment, that kind of thing. I need to give it everything I've got in every pitch. I need to focus on this, and then you take it back one step further, and it's like it gets down to like your bare bones mental process that you're going to do every pitch. And for me, that mental process was like see the pitch in my mind, and then throw it as hard as I can, and be aggressive and attack hitters. And if I did that every time, it would lead to the end result that I wanted.
That's fascinating.
And that has nothing to do with mechanics. That's just how you're doing it too. I mean, that's
right. Yeah.
I think that that's extremely helpful in performance in the game or even in practice. Like, but I like what you said. Like, does that go back to? And then it's like, okay, yeah. Like, how do I do those things even better? Well, I have to be in a good mental state. Am I super stressed out? How's my sleep? Where's my diet at? And then being aware of like, oh, when I eat this, I kind of feel like shit. When I eat these things, I feel way better. My body feels better when I do this. So then it's like, I heard a guy talk about, it's a famous basketball player. He's like, I don't really have choices. He's like, I know if I want to be good, I have to go this way. And it's like, I know that doesn't involve drinking. So I don't even have the choice. Like, if I want to be an all-star, I can't be drinking every night. So it's like, that choice it's simple. It's gone. Like, not going out. And then like all these choices lead up. It's like, yeah, if I want to be good, I have to be in bed by 10 p.m. every night. Or, it's just like you can take that all the way back to like lifestyle and everything.
Yep.
Which is so funny to me because the flip side of that is like, the Spanish Premier League players who are like going out every night and smoking cigarettes and, chasing women and staying out super late. Maybe there's a distinct, Brad and Ben, you hear about like the Brazilian World Cup team who had all these players that played like Real Madrid. Roberto Carlos was like chain smoking and drinking tequila all night long at the club and then would just show up. I assume that's an outlier, but there's probably something to be said for like blowing off some steam. An IPA isn't going to help, you perform physically at the next level. But maybe half of a light beer helps you relax just enough to like let, ease into the evening. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I think that was an old school. I don't think there's too many top level players that are still participating in smoking a cigarette. I think in Italy, they'll obviously have a glass of wine with dinner the night before a game, but I think that's about the extent of it. I really just think everything has kind of been flipped on its head since, the 90s, early 2000s, where that was still the norm. Even when Beckham was at Real Madrid, you saw them going out for a party, and every once in a while, guys will. It's important. I think we talked about this a couple podcasts ago, but ever since MLS started chartering flights, like the guys don't go out anymore after games because it was great. You'd go to New York City, and then you'd have the night to go into the city because you weren't leaving until the next morning, and you got to enjoy a city while you can. Why not go out and hang out? And with soccer, it's a bit different. You've got, 6 to 7 days off in between games. You got enough time to recover as long as it doesn't become a problem. But I still face it with the kids that I coach. Like I've had to have 2 or 3 conversations this year with parents where I can visibly see that their kid is worn down because they're playing soccer and lacrosse, and they're just not to the trained eye. They're just not as sharp. So I have to go to the parents and say, hey, what is so-and-so's schedule this weekend? Because they look worn down to me. They need to just go to the movies with their friends. They need to be a kid. I don't want them playing any sports. I don't want them going to the gym. I just need them to like be a normal human being. Because without all the analytics, those of us, and that's why I think it's important for us to be in coaching, whether or not you think you want to or not when you're done playing. But no one else has that eye test like we do because we've been in it before. And that's really important with this next generation to be able to see that, because their parents can't even see it.
Yeah.
Right. Because they see them every single day. And I do too, but it's only for an hour. But I can see the difference in them just by them being overworked, and they need a break. And so us having a light beer after a game is the equivalent of them going to the movies and eating a bag of Reese's Pieces, like sometimes you just have to do it to get your mind off of things. And it's tough though to see that, and to know that these kids are pushing themselves as hard as they can just for a shot to get into a Division III school to play lacrosse. Like it used to be the guys that wanted to go D1 and the girls that wanted to go D1 were the ones doing all the extra work. But now you're seeing it every single level. To be a college athlete requires what it seems to be that extra, and then extra work, which is mind-boggling to me.
I think this is the ultimate performance dilemma, right? Because it's the more is better attitude, and that's just not how it works. Like you need to dose this stuff the right amount to get the right amount of performance out of it. Because if you just like taking medication, if you do too much, you're going to have negative effects. If you do too little, you're not going to have any positive effects. You got to find that sweet spot. It's not just a singular sweet spot, the zone where we're yielding good results here. And I think you have some parents who are shoving the issue on their kids a little bit, and they look at, well, Mitch Haniger does this for his routine, so that's what my 12-year-old should be doing. It's like bullshit. Mitch Haniger is an adult male professional athlete who knows what he's paying for or what costs he's doing to perform, and he's doing it. Like the kid does not need that experience yet.
Yeah.
And it's just so mentorship's a huge thing. I think maybe it's a coaching lens for Brad. Maybe it's a mentorship role for James and guiding people on how to do this stuff. Like there's lots of ways to help the environment, but we have a way of always overcorrecting with the pendulum swing the other way. So now to create a future professional athlete, you better be doing what you're doing at 11 years old and be full in. Otherwise, you're not going to make it. If you want to get into a university, you better be full in starting age 10, 11, getting your academics sorted out. And it's like all this stuff. And how do you expect a young human who hasn't gone through puberty yet to handle it all?
It's not going to be a very healthy adult if that's what they're doing at 11. That's the thing. That's the cost. I think that the parents need to realize. It's like, yeah, you might be able to get your kid into college, but he might be an alcoholic at 25 and out of the game and burnt out, or he might be a miserable person to be around. And, like, because he wasn't a kid, didn't have fun, didn't see his friends a lot. And
did we talk about that? Sorry, go ahead.
There's a real negative sweet spot, and the alcoholic, depressed, all that person, that's on one end, but there's this giant chunk of people in the middle that are neither. They're neither positive or negative. They're just kind of existing.
Yeah,
because that's how they've learned how to survive through their youth time. Was just, I've got so much shit going on, I'm just trying to get through it.
Did we talk about on our last podcast how like you kind of lose the love for the game if you don't like play it as a kid? Like you get too serious about it, you kind of get burnt out. Did we talk about burnout last time?
That was in the first episode that actually released today. was the distinction between training and playing.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
Right?
Yeah. Because it was like, if you start training and playing like a pro at, say, 10 years old, I feel like that's when I was having my most fun playing baseball. It was like I was with my buddies. I wasn't thinking about how I was doing. I was just hanging out, having a great time playing a sport. And that's what keeps you like loving the sport and playing the sport. I feel like if it turns into work too early, you're going to get burnt out. And how do you expect yourself to have that inner drive, inner passion for the game at 30, if you don't have that thing to back up on your love for the game, that kind of nostalgia that you have for the game that you build at 10, 11, 12, 13 years old, playing with all your friends, and you remember how fun the game is, because at some point, like college, pro, it turns into a job, it's like, it's your job, and like, this is what you have to do your job. But I feel like you have to have that love for the game that keeps you going, that you build when you're young. Does that make sense?
I think that is an organic way to get back to what Brad was talking about understanding the game within the game, is when you're out there with your buddies and your imagination is taking over. You're creating scenarios on your own. You're visualizing
fun.
You're making it fun. You're creating an amount of stress on yourself that you really enjoy, and you're overcoming it and being successful, while playing the game, and that's where we need to get back to, not the robotic training methodologies that we've come across. In my mind,
that just gave me a really good idea. We have games Monday, Wednesday, Friday this week to close out the season, but we only train on Tuesdays. So Tuesday, we're going to show up with the coaches, but then we're just going to tell like the players, this is your practice. You guys do whatever you want to do. We're going to sit here and just hang out. You guys lead it. This is your team. Train how you want to train. See ya. See ya in an hour.
Do that, but bring out a whiteboard and say we have 20 minutes for this activity, and then like have them build it. But so it's not just a giant cluster. But that'd be cool. Set the parameters of, I want this to be competitive. I want it to be fun. I want this and that, and just see how they do. Be unattached to it.
Yeah, that's cool. I'll be interested to hear how that goes.
Yeah. Me too.
I had a coach when I would always show up. It was for a workout. He'd be like, "Hey, what do you want to do today?" He's like, "I know we have to hit some things, but like, what else? Like, what are you thinking?" And it was always that dialogue, and I thought it was cool because it's like,
that's cool.
I have a lot more conviction when I'm like, "No, I want to do this because X, Y, and Z," or "Hey, I think I need to work on in this area." And he's like, "Great, let's hit it. What do you think about adding some of this in for that?" And then it's just like a dialogue, and I think it's super helpful.
That's cool.
It gives it a little bit more purpose.
Yeah,
for sure.
By the way, we didn't ask Mitch's nicknames.
Oh yeah,
it's true.
That's right.
It's true. We didn't. Mitch, we have a tradition here on Athlete Complete where we will have you walk us through the various nicknames that you had starting as a young kid up until now.
I had like family and grandpa and like uncle used to call me Mishka. That was always one. I think it's probably from like Mickey Mouse, because now that I have two young daughters, and like you hear Mickey Mouse, it's like Mishka, Mushka, Musketeer, and then I think that's probably where it started. And then in school, I remember people calling me Mitch the Bitch. That's always one that comes up. And then it just became Hanny, and in college, teammates would say Meech. They would call me Meech for whatever reason, and then mostly just Hanny in sports.
I haven't seen the Mariners social media post Mitch the Bitch yet.
Not yet. I was trying to pull for our. There's a lady in right field when I first got traded to the Mariners that she made these t-shirts that say Mitch's Bitches. And so I'm trying to get a section going wearing Mitch's Bitches shirts.
It's a good fundraising opportunity.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
They shut that one down.
Yeah.
Mitch's Bitches. Great.
That's
I want to go really briefly back to something that you said, Mitch, earlier about talking to a guy in a way that he wasn't really receptive to, and that you were like, oh, okay, I'm going to back off that a little bit because he's not hearing that. And to have now, obviously, two baseball guys. What is it about baseball that makes it so superstitious?
I think it's just kind of hardwired in you. I think personal opinion, but maybe I'm, obviously probably wrong here, but I think there's so much failure that when you do succeed, guys go, "Oh my God, it was this. This is what, oh man, this is why I wore these batting gloves." And then guys take it, have fun with it. And then guys are actually, some of them are really serious about it. Like, and they kind of hide it. They're like, you'll see they're like wearing something that doesn't even match. And it's like, oh, yeah. You just let it go. You don't even really bring it up.
Well, have you guys watched Bull Durham?
Yeah.
Have you guys seen Bull Durham? So there's that point when he's like, he's not having sex with his girlfriend, and it's like, whatever. And he's pitching well, and she gets mad at the other. I crash because he's like, you told him that, he shouldn't have sex with me or whatever. And now he's pitching well. And it's like, he brings up the point of it. If he thinks that's what it is, that's what it is.
Yeah.
If you think it works, it works.
Yeah.
So it's more about placebo necessarily than it is about
Totally. It's nothing's real. It's like, I don't put my left sock on first and that's going to make me throw well. It's like, if you think that's what it is, if you think that something weird like that is making a little difference, it is.
And Pax, I don't know if you think this way, but I have a bunch of things I do that are just based off of preference, routine. And I think if someone watched me, they'd be like, "Oh, he does that because it's, what were we talking about? Superstition. And I'm like, gosh, like I have preference, I have routine, and we do it over and over and over. And so I do this the same way every day because now I don't have to spend any mental thought on what I do. I just know this is what I do every day before the game, like down to the minute. And it's just like, now I don't think about it anymore because it's great. And I can take that capacity and push it towards something else.
Yeah, you're pushing all your decision time to game time. You don't have to make the decision because it's a routine. Right. We only have so much mental space to make decisions in a day. Yeah. So it's like you make all of that just like you don't have to think about it. It's just what you do, and then you save all that for the game. So I think that's kind of what it is. Is that routine?
I had an interesting conversation with my neuroscience mentor Jacques, and he told me you kind of have to be careful with like how to guide an athlete of your guys' caliber, especially on the physical side, about like foam rolling beforehand, stretching, doing this and that, because there's arguments on both sides of whether it's good or bad or whatever. But the process that those athletes go through, which may include something that we perceive to be kind of a negative thing for them, might put their brain in a space that they need to get to do their job well.
Right.
So you don't want to tweak that necessarily, because if they're, how focused do you have to be to do your job? Pretty damn focused. And if that's what gets you to that zone, you have to do it. And if you're messing with that, you might be messing with their total outcome at the end of it.
Interesting. So even if there's some sort of warm up routine that's like maybe overstretching their hamstrings, if that toe touch is like their activation of a flow state, then let it go. Leave it be.
And that's why in my role, you have to get really comfortable with somebody and earn trust so you can have an open conversation with them so they're open to it. But if you tell them that what they're doing is wrong, that's just going to mess with their head a little bit. And they might actually, from a chemical standpoint, need to go through that process to get to the right arousal level to do what they need to do correctly.
I know exactly what you're saying, Ben. And like, I would say there was one year where I saw a lot of guys, to me, being a guy who gets ready super early and has a slow build up for every game, and I do things the same way every single day, I would see guys like kind of fucking off and not doing that and playing around, messing around every game. And it took me a while to realize it's like, oh, but this is what they actually need, because when the game starts, like they can't be thinking about the game all day long, where I'm kind of like, I got to do this, you prepare me for that. And I'm like looking at it like it's like surgical, where other guys like, dude, I can't do that, I'll go insane. And I'm like, I get it now. Like, and I don't try to change them. I'm like, okay.
So like flicking sunflower seeds at your buddy, or, being a goofball is actually that guy's process.
Yeah, well, I would relate, like specifically related to like playing a game in the clubhouse. And like, I'll be like, hey, like, when we were first in Seattle, PAX together, we had like an hour before the game, you're not allowed to play pool. Like, we had a pool table in the clubhouse, and it was like, hey, like, hour before the game, guys are trying to get prepared and get ready, like, cut out the games. And now it's gotten to the point where you can do whatever before it. And I actually think it's fine, because and you don't see a guy who's starting that night playing pool 30 minutes before the game. Like, you don't see that. But the fact that, like, hey, he can, like, get his energy out and not be anxious about the game, I think that's helpful.
Yeah.
So,
totally. I ran into this issue when I transitioned into coaching. Was I would create environments for the players that I thrived in, which was a grinder mentality, work hard, yell.
It's hard because, like, this is what's really helped me get where I am. And I feel like it's been like work harder, work smarter, push. But I'm realizing, like, that's not right for everybody else.
Yeah.
So I can't just tell them, like, yeah, you're not playing well because you don't fucking do anything. You don't work hard. You don't try to get better. Although, like, I do think that's part of it. But how can I help them without inflicting my view on them, and like inflicting like what I think they need to do, and that's right. Like, it might not be right.
Yeah, I think it's like building in time for like what you think needs to be done, but also building in time for what they need, which is, playing pool or whatever, playing a game of cards, but having them be like, hey, make sure you get this in, because this is what prepares you for the game, gets your body ready, whatever. But then you can go play a game of cards to kind of like relax before we get going, kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think
something like that.
I mean, I know they've done studies of this, but like, I think athletes are way more. I think they're even more. When I was with the Giants, they actually did like a poll, and team psychologists said like athletes are this much higher, report anxiety levels this much higher than the normal everyday person. And she's like, and this is just what, and some people will probably say, no, I don't have anxiety around performance when they actually do. So it's probably even higher. So I started like seeing, I'm like, wow, everyone's like has their own little thing to kind of get their mind off of whatever it is. And it looks different amongst every guy. So it's there, it's subtle, but everyone's got a little bit of it.
That takes a real curious mindset as well to pay attention to it and go in. Instead of categorizing someone as oh, this person's lazy or they're not focused enough. Now you get curious about, I wonder why they're doing that.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I started seeing with certain guys, I'm like, this is why he does this. Like, it's not that he's not focused on the game, because he needs to get his mind off of it.
Yeah.
How often is that at odds with this sort of organizational culture? Because for every clubhouse, there's not only the manager, but there's also a culture around this is the way that we do things. And I think about if you are, if you're a little silly or you're kind of doing your own thing, you're a little idiosyncratic, but you're going to a club or organization where things are very rigid, you might not fit in there very well. Yeah. And you're sort of going against the culture there.
I think that's where there can be a lot of friction or a lot of, you feel like you don't fit in. I think in Seattle, I'm super lucky because I think there's a lot of guys that are wired like me that are just like, I feel at peace and like everyone's working hard, doing their thing. And then I think it's always good to like know where the majority of the group is at. So if the majority of the group guys thrive in like a structured, like, hey, we're working hard, we're old school, blah, 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 that's great. And if you see it start going too far of like, hey, we're playing fucking games and, no one's focused. Okay, we need to get back on track this way. But as opposed to you go into a group where it's very much like relaxed, like we're not really trying to think about the game, we're trying to play and have fun. And then you try to make them the other way. Both scenarios aren't going to work out very well. It's knowing what type of guys you have and kind of keeping people in the lane.
As a coach, it's like knowing your team, knowing your players. It's their job.
You can see the guys that can be in a play mode but still execute. And then there's the guys that play mode, but for them, playing means goofing off and they lose their focus. So like
that's how I am. Like if I'm too play, it's not good for me. I always say like I wish I could be like super engaging with the fans and like kind of fucking. You see players like fuck around all the time. I wish I could be that way, but I don't play well when I'm like that. It doesn't work, so I don't do that.
Yeah, I'm the same. I have to be locked in. As you can see guys that can like have a conversation between innings. With a player, another pitcher, or whatever. Whereas I don't want to talk to anybody. I'm like I'm locked in, ready to like in my own head, ready to go out there and pitch again, kind of thing. But everyone's different, and it's hard because you get a young guy to come up. You get a young guy that comes up in the minor leagues, right? And you got this superstar in the team, and they want to be just like the superstar. And maybe what that guy does isn't what works for this young player. And I think that's where like a coach needs to come in and give guidance when they see that not working. You can let them try it, but if it's clearly not working, the guy's not having success, it's like you got to sit that player down, have a conversation with him about it, and just say like, hey, everybody's different. What works for you? What worked for you in the minor leagues? Okay, this guy's kind of like that. Maybe watch this player and watch what he does because he's more like you, and that's going to help you kind of build your routine and your success here in the big leagues. Kind of
and
thing.
Rarely is the superstar a representation of his entire career. Like he started as a rookie,
right?
And he did things, and now he's got this excessive confidence in this comfort with what he's doing. So he's giving that off right now, but that's not how he got there. So that goes back to looking at the bigger picture and the process of the whole thing. Again, I would get curious and want to meet that person if you could develop a relationship with them and see how they did stuff to get to where they got to, and look at the whole thing versus just how they go about things now.
Right. Yep.
That's super interesting.
Yeah.
What do you think, Brad?
I mean, we used to play soccer tennis before every game inside the locker room, and then once Schmetz took over as head coach, it was gone. So that's that old school mentality, even though Ziggy was old school too, I think, and it's never come back ever since. So like you said, and it was the same 5 or 6 guys that would do it before every single game. And that was their way of and I could never do it because I needed to like get work done and do my routine. And I always thought, I'm going to reach for this ball while playing soccer tennis before the game, and I'm going to rip a hamstring. But to each their own. And it was definitely a learning experience. But, one that the new manager, well, he's been there for a long time now, but since I left, has said that's not going to happen anymore. So it is what it is. You got to find different outlets before the game. But you also learned when to switch it on. Like veteran guys, when to switch it on. You have that switch. And I'll always remember Ziggy telling me that was when I was a youngster. You don't know when that switch, you cannot switch it on. As a veteran, you know how to switch it on. And that's always stuck with me ever since. Is I've always echoed that to the young guys and now the high school kids too, is you guys don't have the on switch yet. Like you need that preparation so that you can perform in the game, especially after a long day of school, right? It's really hard just to walk out on a field and expect to perform how you want to perform. So finding that switch is something that is learned versus just being a given talent. Well, for some is a given talent, but the very, very small percentage of people.
Yeah, it's skill development for sure.
Yeah. It's interesting.
Mitch, what's your favorite part about playing baseball?
Competition. I can't get anywhere else, so it's fun to step out there in the box, and it's like nobody can help you now. Like, and it's fun. Baseball, I like how there's so much failure in it because it's just like it just motivates me more. It's like I've kind of had to build a relationship of like the more I fail, the more I want to do better kind of thing. So that's been fun. I love the challenge.
Nice.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Healthy.
Mm-hmm. So good.
One thing I wanted to ask you about that we haven't got into yet is you've had your fair share of injuries, and so have I. And I'm just interested, like, what helped you get through? You had some like injuries that were like back to back to back. How did you like get through that mentally? Like, what did you focus on? Was it hard? Like, did you like go to a dark place for a while and then like climb your way out of it? And what helped you climb out? That kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, definitely in dark places. I think when you're going through it, you think that like maybe it's not normal or, but I think like any athlete, for me, it was like some of the injuries and surgeries I've had was like this is definitely career threatening. You'd hear people say he'll never be the same, stuff like that. I've always had a deep belief that like I'm gonna get better, I'll be fine. So I always knew that like if I just keep working hard every day and I'm focusing on percentages with surgeries always kind of crack me up. People want to throw on like, oh, that you have most athletes 70% of them come back from this, and I would never even throw myself into like the 70 or 30 because I was like that doesn't apply to me because I think if every athlete, I was like I'm going to be better than all these guys in terms of my recovery, my diet, like my doing all the little things that I know that like that group of the stats doesn't apply to me. I think I'm in like a different category, and maybe that's super arrogant, but it was just a confidence thing. Like, no, I'm not going to be in that because nobody's going to take as much time and like care of their body and do what they need to do in order to come back. I was willing to go do whatever I needed to do to come back from injuries, but yeah, super dark places. And then I always convinced myself, even when I didn't believe it, that like, this is the best thing that ever happened to me. Like something good is going to come from this.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh man, I'm going to miss a year. Well, shit, I'm going to come back even better and stronger. I got the year to work on coming like my strength or addressing areas of my body that I know are a little weaker, or I've always dived into the mental side of things. And, I've always believed that like, I'm going to come back stronger from this. And I think that's just like the number one thing is like someone facing an injury. It's like, and you need to do whatever you can do to believe in that. So for me, it was like, I'm going to work extremely hard and I'm going to focus on all the different areas of my life that can help this. And because I believe that I'm going to come back better from this.
Yeah, that's awesome. I did the same thing. It's super interesting. Just I want to know your experience because like I did the same thing. I was always focused on, okay, how can I come back better? And I feel like that's such a huge thing for guys that get hurt is like, if you're going to come back and you want to stick around and keep playing for a long time, like while you're hurt, you got to find a way to get better because the people you're going up against are still playing and they're getting better, So it's like, that drive to like find something. I remember one time it was my diet. One time it was like some strength stuff. Another time it was the mental game things, you find things, just build and build and build and keep on improving upon. So that's cool that you kind of found the same kind of avenue.
And like I said, with just baseball in general earlier, when you asked the question why you like baseball, like I love that. I actually love the challenge of it too. I was like, all right, like let's fucking go. I would like look at it as like a fight. Like, all right, let's go. Like, and to bring back to how you like dissected, all right, how do you make this happen? I would do the same kind of, it's like, all right, I want to come back even better next year. What do I need to do? Well, and it starts with like doing my rehab today. Okay, well then even before that, like, how's my diet? How's my sleep? Am I drinking enough water? Where's my protein intake at? Like all these little things. And every year I've played, it's just gotten more and more extreme in a good way. And it's gotten easier because I don't have to think about things as much. Because when you're starting something new, you have to think about it so much. And then it just becomes like a routine and you become like, it's just the way I do things. It's been super helpful. And I also think like a really important point to make is for athletes is like, hey, you have surgery or you get hurt. Like, for instance, a pitcher has Tommy John. I told one of our guys that Tommy John, I was like, hey, dude, for like a week, 3 weeks, you come up with whatever you want. Freaking stay up late, play video games. If you want to drink a little bit, like just let yourself like go for a little bit. It could be 2 days. It could be a week. For me, it was always really short, but I was like, all right, I'm okay with being depressed or whatever for this many days. I'm going to eat like shit for a week. And then I'm going to dominate this rehab. Because I think it's easy to get into this, like, I'm just rehabbing. I got 18 months or 12 months. And then you're 6 months in and you're still playing video games up to 2, 3 a.m. It's like, you're going to be in the small percentage of the guys that don't come back well.
Yeah, I feel like you got to let yourself feel it. Like it sounds like those early days, you let yourself feel it, let yourself be upset so that you can move on. Whereas like, instead of like never really dealing with it, you're still dealing with it 6 months later in unhealthy ways, right? Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
I also hated to be injured. So I always remembered being injured, and whatever I needed to do to not be injured always motivated me to make sure that I did everything possible to not have that feeling again. Mine were all pretty much soft tissue injuries that were, in theory, preventable. If I did the right things, they would still occur every once in a while, but mitigating those soft tissue things was huge for me, just to stay on the field.
Did you feel like that caused a lot of stress in your life?
Injuries?
No.
Or
to
trying
do all those things to prevent them.
No, because the things that I would do were really just prehab stuff. It was kind of like your routine, right? Before a game. It was small things. Just making sure I did the small things right. I would do my MAT once a week, and who knows if it did anything or it didn't, it made me feel like it did.
Yeah.
And I think that really helped me moving forward because I just fucking hated getting injured.
Same.
And more than I liked being, winning a game, I hated being injured. And so I just tried to do everything.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're good.
The reason why I asked is because I feel like I was in a place where I was like, I needed to do all these things to relieve the stress of like, so I don't get hurt. And over time, it's been like you develop more trust. And I think that in the beginning of an injury or a rehab, that's kind of how you feel. And then you start developing more trust with your body and the confidence. And then it's like you get that looseness comes back. And I think that's also important for athletes to hear. And I wish I would have heard at one point early in my rehabs, or even when I started playing it, it's like, dude, you can do all those things and it's fine. But like, you're going to get to a point where it's okay. You don't feel like you have to do 45 exercises every day in order to play.
Right.
But in the beginning, that might be what it takes. And that's okay too.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a huge one. That trust in your body. That is like probably the biggest thing, especially as a professional, not necessarily when you're younger, but as a professional, that trust in your body that you're not going to do this sprint and you're going to pop a hamstring and then you're out for 4 weeks. And once you get into that negative spiral, it's like, holy shit, how do I get myself out of this?
I think that applies to any grown man listening right now who wants to be able to pick up his kids or, take one trip with a grocery bag or do some of the sports and recreation that make him feel good. Is like, no, I want to be able, I should lift, I should walk, I should prepare my body. I'm going through that now, right? I'm competing in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Like, it ain't going to get easier for me. I'm not going to get fitter easier. It's going to be a hard train. So I have to work out. I want to keep my body fit and strong forever so that I can continue to compete in jiu-jitsu and also feel good and not have back pain and soreness. So I'm just seeing like the applicability of like that, how you see your body and the trust in your body and cultivating that strength so that you can just live a happy, pain-free life. Right.
Mm-hmm. The thing that I'm hearing the most out of all of you, and I've had a version of pleasure of working with all of you, is the mindset piece though to the recovery and the mindset, and then diving into the process. And trust itself comes from repeated experiences. I mean, that's the only way you gain trust. So repeated experiences that your body is going to be okay. As you get more refined and evolved, you understand that, oh, this sensation is actually a threat, so I got to be careful a little bit more, and you start to be savvy with all that stuff. But I worked with this woman named Kim Little, who was a Scottish soccer player and one of the best soccer players on the planet at some point, and she tore ACL, and she was obsessed with the process to get back. She actually loved the nuances of the gym and nuances of getting little things stronger and doing this, and fascinated with how it worked, and she came back just fine. And I think that's exactly what you guys are talking about. And as a young person listening to you guys talk about your injuries, because you guys had some serious stuff that was a real, genuine, life-threatening. I mean, it threatened your career, right?
Yeah.
That's your livelihood. But your mindset was so good that you were able to dig out of it and get back to playing. And that was something I couldn't do. I had fear. I was always worried about down the road. And I didn't dive into the process of the whole thing. And I could never get back to where I wanted to get to. But I think as a young person, a parent listening to you guys talk about this stuff, because as a young person, their identities and attachments to their sport are tied up to it so highly these days that when they get injured, their value's gone, their identity's gone. So it's hitting them even harder. And if you looked at the literature and the research, confidence or mood is going to be a top predictor of re-injury or lack of confidence. So the psychological state has these physical repercussions, and I think anyone listening to this needs to listen to these pros who have done it and survived it and gotten back out there. Mindset's huge.
Yeah,
kudos to you guys.
I would think about it as like, this is the game I'm playing now. It's like my rehab. How do I win this game?
Yeah.
I'm not going to be on the field, so how do I win this game? And like, it was a game.
Great.
Yeah, it's a good way of thinking about it. For sure.
I love it. Well, your mindset and tenacity is just shining through, Mitch. It's like I feel like we're all anybody listening right now is thinking, "Damn, that he's focused, he's dialed."
Like, I'm not going to say it was super easy. Like, it was hard for sure. Like, it was hard. I had people in my life that were extremely helpful. I've talked to multiple different mental performance coaches. I've always tried to soak up the information. Ben's been a huge help. There's been a ton of people that I can attribute. The list goes on. And I think that was one thing was like, I'm just going to find a way, like whether it's physical help, mental help, whatever it is, I'm going to find a way to get better.
Please, it sounds like you searched out those resources though, too. Like people probably came to you, but you also like did it for yourself. You went out and found what you needed to help you get back, which is huge. It's huge.
Love it.
Do hard shit.
Do hard shit. What else are you doing? This has been so great, Mitch. I mean, I love the analytics conversation. I love the mentality stuff, the injury recovery, the nuance of playing at the highest level is just, it's conversations like these need to be had more and more and more and more. And it's such a pleasure to have you on today, man. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me. It's a great conversation with you guys.
Yeah. Thanks, dude.
Thanks, dude.
Yeah.
And I love that we just like went right into it. Just press the record button, just flow. That was a good one. He had tons of cool stuff to share.
Yeah, he's awesome.
Yeah,
he knows so much. He's been through so much, and I think that's like he's learned so much about himself. And he's just a really like thoughtful, curious guy too.
Sure.
So he really dives into things, and he's smart, and I feel like he's learned a lot over his career. Like I remember him when he was super young, right? Because we played together when he was in his first 2 years in the show, and just to see how he is now from how he was then. You can just see that like how much he's grown through just like playing the game, and it's really cool to see that.
Yeah, and he exudes. He lives what he's saying for sure. And I work with him a bunch, and he's always been thoughtful, interested in what's going on, but hyper competitive. Like really, really, really competitive. Does not like being told that he's going to have X amount of limitation with anything. He's like, fuck that. No, he means that when he says, I'm going to find a way to do it better. And it's pretty cool. And he's just a great guy.
Yeah.
You got to have guys like that on your team though. You can't all be told what to do. Some guys have to push back and know when to push back, and you make a career out of that too. Right. If you can perform on the other end, right. You gotta back your shit up if you're going to say all those things.
For sure.
You can't just be the talker and do all the extra stuff. You actually have to put up the numbers.
What's the value of that? Just acting as a pressure test for the way things are done, or like what's the real value that in being the zigger when other people are zagging?
Yeah, but I always thought it was important in the locker room. Like Dave Tinney was a huge resource for us, and I always will respect Dave Tinney. I mean, sports scientist, whatever you want to call him, has been with the Sounders, Orlando Magic, Kansas City, now with Austin FC. He's been just about everywhere, and he's the top of his game. But I always got joy in pushing back because you got a lot of young guys that'll just do exactly what they're told, and it wasn't because I didn't believe in what he was doing. I just wanted a real explanation of what and why. Maybe similar to Mitch and maybe you guys also, but how he approached those things. I'm not just going to do them because someone says I need to do them. I want to know why I'm doing them. Mm-hmm. And even with Dave, it's just, dude, just do it. I know what I'm doing. Right. That would be his philosophy. But I need to know why I'm doing these things. So there was always a little bit of like, oh, fuck, I got to go. Oh, here we go. We're doing this again today, Dave. Could you at least mix up the workouts? Whatever it is, just like the general ribbing of why we're doing something. And ultimately, it created a really good bond that was trustworthy in the end. But I think you have to have those guys. Otherwise, we all just kind of file and rank. And to be honest, when you do that, the guys in the front office, whoever it is, they have their job forever because they don't get any pushback and they're not challenged. And so I think it's appropriate to have a couple guys like that in the locker room to really challenge, guys that have their philosophy. It's like, okay, well, why do you have that philosophy? Why do I need to be doing this?
There's definitely two sides to that. You're a major pain in the ass, by the way.
Yeah.
But
that's the only way you grow.
It keeps them sharp though. Because you're a respected veteran pro who's had a lot of success in your U.S. men's national team, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, you earn the right to, I want to know why. Like what's
right.
But some guys do that without having earned the right.
True.
And then it's
true.
That's a different dynamic.
Yeah, that's a different dynamic. Yeah.
Interesting.
You got to earn the respect to be able to do that. And then that's what pushes growth, I think, though. Like it probably by challenging people, that's how you make them smarter. Like when they say when you can explain something to somebody, then you really understand it.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of you just telling them something. If you can actually explain it and make them understand, it makes you understand what you're doing even better.
Yeah.
Great point.
Yeah.
Especially if you can explain it simply.
Yeah.
To a fifth grader. Yep.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. Well, that was a good one. That was really, really focused, good flow. Everybody was, chiming in and that was another great one. Number 6 in the can, as we like to call it. Number 1 is released now. If you're listening to this right now, this little sort of post-game wrap up with Mitch Haniger, go back to the start, watch all of them from the start, watch the trailer, number 1, number 2, and so on, because it's conversations like this that repetition will ingrain some of these important ideas that you can use for yourself, for your players, for your kids who are athletes, and drive this stuff home because it will be useful in the long run.
Hopefully.
So see you later.
See you later, pal.
So